discussing the 6+1 traits rubric. This rubric is a wonderful tool to use as a diagnostic tool, mainly to evaluate student writing samples. This rubric will allow us to pinpoint the specific areas a student may be struggling with in the area of written expression. As a side note, this is the rubric we will be using to evaluate student writing samples for our AT writing assignment that is due at the end of the semester. So many schools and districts use or adapt some sort of variation of the 6+1 trait rubric. And it was actually developed by Education Northwest. Researchers and teachers participated in the development of this writing rubric. So according to the research backed by Education Northwest, the 6+1 trait writing rubric is actually an analytical model for assessing and teaching writing. And it's made up of 6+1 key qualities that define what strong writing truly is. These qualities, and we're going to go more in depth into them later on, include ideas, organization, voice, word choice, sentence fluency, conventions, and presentation. The rubrics have been field tested, they are research based, teacher friendly, and are designed for easier use across text types such as informative writing, explanatory, argument, or narrative writing. So continuing our conversation centered around data-driven instruction from last week, in general and as with all subjects we teach, we need to know what to teach in every subject for our students because we are at the heart of everything interventionist and we need to use assessment data to give us this information. So for this section, we will be focusing on using diagnostic data to inform our decisions about teaching writing. Assessment in writing is often done with a rubric. I know there's many different rubrics out there to use. However, we will be focusing on using the 6+1 traits rubric to diagnose writing challenges. And there's actually one main reason why we're focusing on using this rubric. And that is that the 6+1 traits are actually present in all good writing, like I mentioned previously. This means that the rubrics for state and national writing exams are all rooted in the same 6 ingredients that make up good writing. Later in our course, we will examine the ways in which the Smarter Balance, SAT, and ACT writing rubrics all overlap and focus on the 6+1 trait of writing. Another reason we will be using the 6+1 writing rubric to diagnose and provide writing interventions is that it's one of the few tools that we can use to help us support students to meet grade level writing standards. If you haven't downloaded it yet, please pause this recording now and download the 6+1 writing rubric from Canvas located under week 4. Please download version 1. Hopefully you paused and you downloaded that 6+1 writing rubric. You will notice that there are actually 3 different versions of this rubric that I uploaded on Canvas. The first version, which I asked you to download, is very long because it explains what each subsection of each trait is. This version is really helpful when you are just getting started with using this rubric. This version will also guide you with scoring writing samples and determine appropriate interventions for your students. The second version of the 6+1 writing rubric is a condensed version that you can use when you no longer feel you need all the explanations. Finally, I have also uploaded a 6+1 writing rubric meant for primary students from kinder through 2nd grade. The first area the rubric focuses on is that of ideas. We look at a writing sample and focus on the way ideas flow. Do the ideas match the overall topic? Are the ideas logical? Do the supporting details match the ideas in the writing sample? Those are kind of questions that you ask yourself as you are scoring your writing sample. The second area in this rubric explores organization. We look through the writing piece and check for strong openings and closings. We look for good transitions. Is there a logical sequencing of ideas? Are these ideas supporting details that make sense? The third section of the 6+1 traits rubric is that of voice. In general, assessing voice is hard as it is more advanced writing competency. However, some things to look for in this area include voice consistency, personality, and style that is consistent throughout the writing piece. Does it sound sincere? Does it sound like they're really writing about something that they care about? All this makes up the trait of voice. The next area is word choice. Word choice includes writing with a good selection of words and varied vocabulary. You may notice many beginning writers use the same words. The word good is one that students use often. One way to address this is to let students write their paragraph or essay. Then have the students go back and circle words they repeat throughout their paragraph or their essay and have them replace it with a synonym. Sentence fluency is the fifth section. Sentence fluency is actually a great area to work on with a lot of beginning writers. It's not about paragraphs or connected text so much, it's about learning how to make a lot of different kinds of sentences. The most common thing we see with struggling writers is run-on sentences. Students will often write a paragraph with one really long sentence. There'll be a lot of ands, and there doesn't seem to be an end in sight. Students who struggle with sentences fluency benefit from first teaching them how to break their writing down into short, simple sentences. The next step is to teach them how to combine some of their sentences into compound sentences. This is where we would teach them about conjunctions. So if you get a student who gives you a writing sample with a ton of run-on sentences, you might consider choosing this as your goal for your AT writing project. AT. The last trait in the 6 traits rubric is conventions. This includes spelling, punctuation, capitalization, syntax, and grammar. Sadly, many teachers have students focus on a ton of time working on conventions. I am here to say, and everyone in the CSUN SPED department will say the same thing, conventions should be the last area to focus on. And there's one simple reason. This is because this area can easily be supported with assistive technology. So I want you to repeat after me. Conventions should be the last area that we should focus on. Therefore, do not choose conventions. I repeat, do not choose conventions as an area of focus for your assistive technology writing project. Repeat after me. Do not choose conventions. Oh, look at that. Do not choose conventions. So here is the 6 trait plus 1 rubric for grades 3 and up. As I mentioned before, there are many writing rubrics out there. Even if you end up working in a school district that asks you to use a different rubric from this one, everything you learned today and moving on forward will still apply. Here's how you would use this. Let's say that I am looking at the idea section of the rubric and writing sample. I would go through the idea section and pick the examples that match my writing sample. So you will notice the overarching question here is, does the writer stay focused and share original information or a fresh perspective on the topic? You will notice also at the top, there are numbers. These are actually corresponding to a score that you would give the student. Mainly ones would we would consider the student a beginner. If they get mainly twos, we would consider them as an emerging writer. If you give them mainly threes, they would be considered in the developing stage. A four is someone that is a capable writer. They have a lot of the ingredients needed to make or support their ideas. A score of 5 means that they are considered either a proficient or experienced writer. And a score of mainly all sixes means that they are an exceptional writer. So it's important to note that your score will more than likely skip around. So just because you get a writing sample and they get a 3, in terms of their topic emerging, that doesn't mean that the student's going to get a 3 all down the column. It's very typical that some areas they will score developing or a 3. Other areas they may score a 4, other areas a 2, and so forth. After scoring the writing sample in the area of ideas, I usually take the average of all the ones that I highlighted. And we're going to go over this in the next slide. So let's go ahead and, actually, it's not the next slide. I think I added it here. Okay, so I went ahead and highlighted as an example. So let's say that I am reading a writing sample and I notice that the student's topic becomes clear. It's a little broad. I decide to give them a 3 in this area. I also look for support or evidence of their topic or their main idea. And I notice, you know what? The topic is incidental, maybe a little confusing, not really focused. So I'm going to give them a 3 again. When I look to see if they have included details that support their main idea, I notice that there are some details that begin to define the topic. So I go ahead and give them a 4. When looking to see whether their information relies on either their own experiences or something that they've experienced or seen firsthand, and they are incorporating that into their writing, I would give them a 3. When looking to see if I have as a reader any unanswered questions for my hypothetical writing sample, I'm going to give them a 2 because I just feel like there's a lot of unanswered questions. And again, this is just showing you how the scores will skip around. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to get 3s all down the column. Finally, when looking to see if the author makes any connections between themselves, the world, other text, I notice, you know what? They did a really good job of including some anecdotes, meaning that they're relating the main idea to their own lives. So when looking at this, I would go ahead and add all of these scores. I would add 3 plus 3 plus 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 5. I would then take the average of all the ones that I highlighted, which gives us a total of 20. We divide 20 by 6 and we get a score of 3.3 or 3. So you do this method for every single trait. Let's take a look at, before we jump in with an actual writing sample, what the 6+1 writing rubric looks like for kinder through 2nd grade. So again, as I mentioned, I have included this on our Canvas page under week 4. And if you are teaching anywhere between kinder, 1st, 2nd grade, definitely use this rubric. As you will see, it still follows the same kind of scoring process of 1 through 6. However, the expectations are developmentally appropriate for younger students. Okay, so we are going to look at a 3rd grade writing sample and use the 6+1 trait rubric to assess it. the first thing that I'm going to suggest to you all that you must do with every writing sample is to translate it. And what do I mean by that? Well, you want to transcribe it from what the student has written to something that looks much more put together. And there's a couple of reasons why we do this and why we recommend this. One, we need to figure out what the writing sample says. Sometimes the legibility of the handwriting impacts the underlying message. So we really want to try to get rid of as much distraction as possible so we can get to the gist of what is this student writing about. Secondly, you are able to remove bias by typing it out, transcribing it. Sometimes it is hard to focus on the content because the handwriting legibility or the spelling is really rough. So it kind of unfortunately causes us to give the student a lower score in a specific area. So as you can see, I went ahead and transcribed the writing sample, and it is transcribed as follows. First, I open the wrapper of the gum. I kip up the gum. Next, I put the gum in my mouth. I chewy it, and it was pink and hard. Last, I try to make bubble, but it was hard. Okay, so now that we have transcribed it, we can look at the first trait on the 6+1 traits rubric, which is ideas. If you've downloaded it, I suggest that you go ahead and just kind of do this along with me so you start getting into the groove, the practice of using this tool. So let's take a look at the presence of main ideas. So we're going to take it row by row. So again, we're looking at this bubblegum writing sample, and we are going to start with row A, which is focusing on a topic. Is there a main topic? I think that the main idea or the main topic is present. The whole writing sample focuses on one topic, which is bubblegum. So given that, I'm going to go ahead and give it a score of 4 because I feel that the topic, although is broad, I feel that there is a clear direction. Now let's look at row B. Okay. Row B is asking us to see if there's support for the topic. In other words, what evidence is there that strengthens the information about bubblegum? I feel that there is support for the topic because, he or she talks about gum coming in a wrapper, that the consistency of the gum is chewy. And then the student also describes the color of the gum. So I feel like, you know what? The student could benefit from fleshing out some key ideas, but overall, I think that this deserves a score of 4. Next, we're going to go ahead and look at row C. And this one focuses on details. So with that, I think most details in this writing sample relate to the main idea. Again, the student is describing different characteristics of bubblegum. So I think I would give this honestly a score of 4 in that area. I don't want to give it a 5 because I don't think the details explain the main idea or make it more interesting or precise. So again, I'm going to go ahead and give it a score of 4. Row D asked if we feel that the author is using their own knowledge, their own experience to write. And with that, I would say that I think that the student does demonstrate some personal knowledge of the main idea. He or she knows the consistency. They know that gum usually comes in a wrapper. So because of that, I am going to, again, give them a score of 4. The next row, which is row E, asks to determine if we understand the content the student has written about and if we have any unanswered questions. Although I feel I understand the main idea of this writing sample, I am left with some questions. It obviously relates to chewing gum, but I'm not exactly sure what the student is trying to say about chewing gum. I mean, I can assume that they are writing the steps of how to chew gum, but as the reader, as the audience, I shouldn't have to guess. The writing sample should explain that very clearly. So, for that reason, I would give the student a score of 3. Finally, does the author help the reader make connections? And again, we're looking at connections between themselves, a possible text that they may be reading in class, things, situations that are going on in the world, or other resources. And I think they make connections between themselves. But I am not really sure. I don't see any strong evidence that they're making connections to either of the factors that I just mentioned. So for that reason, I'm going to give the student a 2 in that area. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and add all of our scores. Okay, so I got a 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus a 3 plus a 2, which gives us a total of 21. When I average those scores together, I get a total of 3.5. But I feel that the students' area of ideas is not necessarily, a 4 just yet. I feel like a 3 would be more suitable for the student's writing sample, again, that we're looking at right here. So even though I got a 3.5, I'm going to go ahead and give the student a 3 because it gives me room to provide some nice interventions to help develop their ideas. Okay, so now you will get the chance to practice using the 6+1 trait rubric. We will score the area of organization. Okay, so if you can please do me a favor and go to the page that is focused on organization. So here's what I would like you to do. I want you to pause the recording and I want you to look at the organization rubric, which is located right here. Okay? And I want you to go ahead and score the writing sample about bubble gum using this organization rubric from the 6+1 traits rubric. You will then unpause the recording and we'll see if our scores match. Okay? So what are you going to do right now? You're going to stop the recording or pause the recording. Okay? So I will see you in a bit. Okay, so hopefully you pause the recording and you analyze the area of organization for the bubblegum writing sample. So now let's go ahead and see if our scores match. So this is how I scored the area of organization. So again, I started with row A, and it is asking if there is some sort of recognizable lead to this writing sample, or if there's kind of like a nice conclusion present. Honestly, I feel that, the student did start kind of with a generic introduction or a lead. I might even go down to a 2 because I don't feel that it is effective. I mean, it might be, the student to start with first. I opened the wrapper of gum. So normally we don't like starting with a writing sample like that. So if you got between a 2 or a 3, you're on the right track. Next, we're going to look at row B, and it's asking about transitions. Does the student include any transitions in their writing sample? I actually think that they do. They lead us by using chronological words, first, next, last. So that's actually really strong strength. So I actually gave that area a 4. The next area is talking about sequencing. Does the student demonstrate some sort of sequencing of details that make sense? I feel that he or she does. So I'm going to go ahead and give them a 4 in that area. Row D is asking about the pacing of the details and the information being presented in the writing sample. I actually think that the pacing is done fairly well. There is still some areas though that I feel the student could benefit from, exploring more effectively. But I think overall, if you assigned this writing sample a score of between a 4 and a 5, you are right on track. If a student is required to write a title, how does a title fare in comparison to what they wrote about? So I feel that the title of this writing sample is Bubblegum. It's kind of uninspired, it's not original. And so you can go, either way, between a 3 or a 4. I gave it a 4 because I do feel that although uninspiring, the title does relate to the overall main idea of the writing sample. Finally, we look at row F, and we are looking at the structure of the actual writing piece. And I felt that the structure, for the most part, works for the purpose and for the reader. However, again, like I said previously, when we were scoring the section of ideas, I do feel that there's still a lot of unanswered questions in terms of the purpose that this writing sample is serving. So here we go. I go ahead and add all these scores. So I would do a 3 plus a 4 plus a 4 plus a 5 plus a 4 plus a 5. And I get a total of 25. I divide it by 6 because there are 6 rows. And I get a total of 4.1 or 4. I would say we are in alignment with our scoring of this writing piece in the area of organization if you also got anywhere between a 3 or a 4. Okay, so now we have come to the end of this asynchronous lecture. So I'm going to go over your 3 in-class assignments for this class session. So in-class activity 4A, okay, that's your first one. It's in the orange box right here. First, I hope you've been taking notes on this recording because that is your first activity. So you're going to go ahead and just scan or upload your notes to Canvas under in-class activity 4A. Your second activity, in-class activity, is titled in-class activity 4B, and it asks you to upload your scoring of the organization section from the 6+1 traits rubric that we just completed together. If you need a reminder, it's this one right here, focused on organization. Okay, you're going to go ahead and just upload it. If you printed this out, go ahead and just take a picture or scan it in. Okay, and lastly, your in-class activity 4C. This one asked you to go ahead, you're going to use your 6+1 writing rubric, and you are going to score a writing piece entitled Invention. Okay, all of this is delineated on Canvas. All the materials are located there. Just please remember that when you are looking at the writing piece titled Invention, that the first thing you do is you transcribe the writing sample, and then you're going to go through the 6+1 writing traits rubric. As always, let me know if you have any questions, and I hope you have a wonderful day or night depending on when you're watching this. Take care.